Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm really excited to deliver this session today. Let's get nerdy about the quantum revolution, understanding and preparing for a post-quantum world. So let's dive right in. So the agenda today, you'll get to know me a little bit. We'll talk through some objectives. We'll talk through what is quantum computing. What's the problem once we have a quantum computer that shows an advantage? What are the risks? What we can do, and that's a really important section here. And then if there's some time at the end, I'm happy to take questions as well. So a little bit about me. My name is Mehak Kalsi. An easy way to pronounce my name is what the heck Mehak, and then last name is Kalsi, very close to Kelsey. I work in cybersecurity consulting. I am a manager at a global consulting firm. I'm a subject matter expert in cybersecurity, quantum computing, and CMMC for those who work with the defense industry. They'll know that. Recently, I was featured by Authority Magazine as a leader in the quantum computing industry. I have professional certifications from Stanford University and MIT in advanced cybersecurity and quantum computing, respectively. And I'm also the co-chair of the Cloud Security Alliance Quantum Safe Security Working Group. And then, of course, I have a couple of certifications, a little bit more about my background there. But I did want to point to my little helper there on the top right. When I've had a very long day with a lot of things going on, he takes over. His name is Tesla, like the scientist, Nikola Tesla, and he helps me out. He's always a great resource to have. So now let's talk through some objectives. So by the end of this session, the goals are that you'll be able to understand the differences between classical and quantum computing. You'll be able to recognize the risks quantum computers pose. You'll be able to speak to the cybersecurity risks associated with not implementing or delaying post-quantum readiness, and then identify strategies you can implement starting today to move towards your quantum readiness. Okay, so what is quantum computing? A little background here. So quantum computing isn't just, unlike classical computer, just getting smaller and faster. It's actually a paradigm shift in how you process information. And as we move along, you'll see what that is, what those changes are. And so we're moving towards more powerful systems that can handle more complicated computations. And one of the things I wanted to define here was classical computing versus quantum computing. So at a high level, classical computing is just anything that isn't a quantum computer. So the laptop on your desk, supercomputers, anything is just considered classical, and then anything else is quantum. And so that's pretty much how I'm going to refer to these two things moving forward. And then a really interesting note here is that just because we do have quantum computers today, and just because they exist doesn't mean we've stopped using classical computers. And in the near future, it is expected that we'll use both at the same time. And there's different reasons for it. Quantum computers are expensive, right? So when you're measuring a qubit, you use a classical computer to store that data and measure it. So I know maybe that's jumping the gun a little bit, but just giving you an idea that just because quantum computers are coming doesn't mean classical computers are obsolete. And then just quantum computers, they're going to help not just certain industries, but basically change everything. But the main ones that they're going to help that we can see coming are things like material science, chemistry, pharmaceuticals, machine learning, optimization, and things like logistics, and then even cybersecurity. I know one of the things I mentioned earlier might have been, what are the threats from quantum computing specifically related to cybersecurity? There is a way that we can actually use quantum computing to also help with cybersecurity. So this table kind of gives a really good visual of classical computing versus quantum computing. And we'll walk through this table with a couple of diagrams and things like that to help in understanding what the difference really is between the two. So when it comes to classical computing, information is stored as bits, zeros and ones is pretty much your choice right there. Now with quantum computing, they're stored as qubits, okay? And that information can either be 0, 1, or anything else in between. Okay, it can be all over the place. So we'll talk about those two things first, and let's move on and look at this. It's showing you a good visualization of what a bit versus a qubit here is, but what I want you to focus on is on the right side, which is what is called a block sphere. You can represent bits and qubits on this, and just makes it a little bit easier. Now imagine a block sphere kind of like the Earth, okay, like a sphere, okay? And so when you're thinking about a traditional bit and you have the North Pole, a traditional bit, that would be 0, and the South Pole would be 1, okay? When it comes to a qubit, it can be 0 at the North Pole. It can also be at the South Pole, it can be 1. But just like the Earth, it can be anywhere on this sphere. So it could be at the equator. It could be pointing through, India. It could be pointing through Australia. It doesn't really matter. It can be any of those different positions, which is what helps the computation with a quantum computer, within a quantum computer. So the next thing we'll look at is superposition. So that is what helps information, in a qubit be stored as 0, 1, or anything in between. So this is what superposition kind of looks like. If you look at this skateboarder we have here, the skateboarder at any given time on this ramp in the real world would be, they could be on the left side and be 0, they could be on the right side and be 1, or anywhere in between. The important thing to notice here is that until this, I know the eye is a little strange, but until it represents viewing, until we look at the qubit, there is really no way to know what the state is. Is it 0? Is it 1? Is it something else? And what's interesting here is once you view it and you actually try to figure out, hey, which one is it? Where is it? Sometimes you can essentially break the qubit. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is later. It's called decoherence. And it is one of the things that can happen to a qubit. It's one of the ways it can decohere. So another way to think of this too is that if you have a coin that's flipping through the air, at any given time, it can be 0, 1, meaning heads or tails, or anything in between, but you really don't know until it lands on one side. So that's superposition, and you usually get that through a Hadamard gate. If you're coding or a quantum computer, that's really the gate you would use to get there. Now, the next thing let's look at is the third line, is how information, once it's computed, what type of output you can expect. And so with a classical computer, basically the information you put in, you're probably just going to get one result, and you're going to get the same result every single time. With a quantum computer, you may potentially put in the same information and get multiple possible outputs, and maybe even different outputs, just depending on what the information is. Same with processing. Calculations are done in classical computers one at a time. And we have a great visual coming up to show this. Whereas quantum computing does parallel processing, and it's done, where you do multiple calculations that are run at the same time, and you do this by entangling qubits, which we'll also take a look at. So first, let's look at processing, okay? So if you look on the left, that's a quantum computer, that is parallel processing. And on the right, you have serial processing, which is a regular computer. So if you look on the right, you're seeing that you have the input. One computer will run one solution at a time to say, hey, what is the solution here, and what are my different options by running this calculation? A quantum computer, if you look on the left, can run the same calculation, multiple, like several of them at the same time, and actually come to a better and more optimal solution, because if you can run different solutions together, you can come to a better and faster solution as well. So let's look at entanglement, like how that works. So I mentioned entanglement earlier, and this is basically when you take qubits and there's a gate that you run, it's called a C0 gate, and you essentially bind them together. And this is, besides superposition, you use entanglement to get the benefits of quantum computing, because if you put two qubits together, the processing that you're doing gets faster, and that's essentially how a quantum computer can do what it does. So if we look at superposition and entanglement together, this is a good visual of that. If you use superposition on the qubits and then you entangle them together, for example, if you entangle two qubits together, the computational power is actually the power of 4. You can actually run 4 computations together. If you entangle 3 qubits together, then you can run 8 computations together, and so on and so forth. So as you see on the screen, the more qubits you can entangle, the more computation power that you have. So that at a high level is how qubits function. Now let's talk a little bit about their circuit behavior. And so this goes back to, again, the zeros and ones for classical computers, whether it's traditional circuit behavior, okay? For qubits, it's more quantum mechanics determines that circuit behavior, and we talked about that a little bit already. The other difference is temperature. So we do know that classical computers need, colder temperatures, but they're reasonable, okay? Reasonable temperatures, 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And then, which is about, I put the kelvins in parentheses on purpose because it helps you see the difference between a classical computer and quantum computer in terms of temperatures. So quantum computers, because of how sensitive qubits are, need to actually be extremely cold. They run at a temperature that is colder than space. Now, 0 Kelvin is absolute zero. For those of us who love science, absolute zero is where everything stops, right? All cellular behavior. That would actually stop a qubit too, which is why we say quantum computers run colder than space, but not at 0 Kelvin. It is just a slight bit warmer than 0 degrees Kelvin. But if you look at it, that's still extremely cold. It's just a little bit, it's around like negative 458 degrees Fahrenheit or so, not negative 460. That was just to show you how close you can actually get. And it's extremely cold to keep them from what I mentioned earlier already. We talked about decoherence. Besides what we discussed earlier about how you can basically break a qubit by measuring it, another way to do it is by not having it at a cold enough temperature. So here's a graphic that shows what I was mentioning earlier about measuring. This person in the middle is measuring a qubit, and you can see it's kind of broken. It has this like shading on the side or shadow, whereas the qubit on the left that you're looking at is, again, you don't know what it is. It could be 0, 1, or anything in between. But once you touch it and measure it, it kind of falls apart. And it can also happen if you don't keep a qubit or a quantum computer at the right temperature. So one last thing to talk about here, right now, classical computers, and this is one of the most important parts, this bottom row, is that classical computers can't run Shor's algorithm in a reasonable amount of time. Shor's algorithm, created by Peter Shor, was created back in the 90s, and basically it is theorized that if that algorithm is run on a quantum computer, it could break current asymmetric encryption. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that in the coming slides about what that means. But at this time, you can run Shor's algorithm on a classical computer, but it would just take an unreasonable amount of time to break that encryption. And so it's safe for now until we do get that quantum computer that shows a quantum advantage. And for those who don't know that term, quantum advantage just means when a quantum computer would be able to run something like Shor's algorithm faster than any classical computer on Earth. So basically, quantum advantage is when we'll see a quantum computer do a calculation better or faster than any classical computer that we currently have. So what's the problem? This is going back to that main thing about running Shor's algorithm on a quantum computer. So public key encryption is what we're talking about. And so here we know public key encryption, you have two keys. You have a public key and you have a private key. And a public key is used to encrypt data And the private key is used to decrypt the information. And what's interesting here is most organizations where people work will use PKE to secure their information. Additionally, the information on the internet is also secured by PKE. So this means that any type of communication over the internet, whether it's email, whether you're going shopping and you're buying something with your credit card, any of that, if a quantum computer comes along and runs, it's theorized again, that runs Shor's algorithm, all of that encrypted information that currently a classical computer cannot break in a feasible amount of time just becomes available, okay? So, and there's a little bit more information about, PKE is uncrackable, right? 2048 bits, and they can't do that, but a quantum computer running Shor's algorithm would actually be able to break a key pair that is twice as long in just a couple of hours, which is amazing. Now, I did want to touch on the non-technical challenges of quantum computing too, since we are talking about what the risks are. And one of the, sorry, not the risks, some of the challenges. And so one is the timeline for the quantum advantage. So we talked about what that is. One of the biggest things that is discussed in the quantum world today amongst quantum professionals like me and my peers is, hey, when do we think this quantum advantage is going to come along? And some say, you know what, it's right around the corner, 5 to 10 years. Some say 20, some say even longer. And so the reason there isn't a consensus, one of them, is that there is a lack of visibility into what's going on in the global scientific community. So some countries do share, the progress they're making, while others not so much. Keep that information secure. But what happens there is, if that country gets a quantum advantage and shows it, we may not know until it's too late, because it could be, there's a lot of ways you can use this technology. And there's, again, discussions around what it might be. It could hit, for example, our financial systems. It could hit, it could have catastrophic effects on things like cryptocurrency, things like that. So again, it is a challenge to try to figure out, hey, when is this going to happen? And interestingly, for those, the group I'm a co-chair for with the CSA, the Quantum Safe Security Working Group, if you go to our page, you'll see a countdown clock. That's some of us quantum professionals getting together, putting an estimated date on when we anticipate a quantum advantage may happen. And then, having that live countdown if you want to go take a look. The other thing is profit. So we all understand that in order for these emerging techs to work, money is needed, and you need it to be able to do the research. The only issue here that can happen is that if an organization is very focused on just selling a product rather than progressing the technology, they may use practices like scare tactics and things like that, and sell organization solutions that are either not enough for their organization, like won't protect them enough, or are too much. Maybe you're spending too much money. So just keep that in mind when you're considering this. This is a challenge, and it's something you'll want to keep in mind at your organizations to right size the solution that you're going to need. And then train professionals. So there are people working on this. We have quantum physicists. We have so many people who are doing good work around this, but there's still today a gap in the number of talented professionals who can do this and how many are actually going into it. We all don't need to be quantum physicists to do quantum computing. I'm not a quantum physicist, but there needs to be a certain background for it. Math, science, physics, all of that comes into play, and also technology that needs to come together to understand what's happening, and then also bring that information to larger organizations on what they can do, kind of like we're doing today. So let's talk about some of the risks that you can face. Now, no matter what you work in, whether it's corporate, education, manufacturing, retail, does not matter. You have some compliance and regulation requirements that you need to comply with. So make sure you familiarize yourself with those and what those are when you start going down this path, because that will help guide what you need to do. And just again, keeping all that in mind, just know that CISA, NIST, and NSA are encouraging organizations to be quantum ready. And what they're doing is saying, hey, step one, create a quantum readiness map, which basically you would plan and scope your organization's migration to PQC. Post-quantum cryptography is what PQC stands for. And part of that roadmap should include information about bullet 2, which is your cryptographic inventory of your IT and OT systems. And then third, discuss your post-quantum readiness roadmaps with your vendors, because you'll want them to be on board too. If there are any tech vendors you have that you need, you want these vendors to have ideally their own quantum readiness roadmaps that they can share with you. When are they planning to do this? What are their plans? Because it affects your business too. Again, from a compliance and regulation perspective, but also from just your business functioning, what they're doing. And then supply chain quantum readiness is the last portion, which again, they may not be your tech vendors, but if it's a part of your supply chain, again, if you're in retail or you're working in manufacturing, you need to know in your supply chain what is going on, because if there's just one part of your supply chain that gets impacted, again, this goes to any cybersecurity strategy, that can affect your business. So this is straight from CISA, NIST, and the NSA. They're encouraging this. There's also FIPS 203, 204, and 205, which are basically the we'll call it post-quantum cryptography, that there was basically they put out an ask for, hey, what are cryptographic mechanisms or algorithms that can be used to safeguard against quantum computers running, essentially Shor's algorithm. And these were the winners. And you can take a look at them online. And they are still in draft version, but comments have closed. And you can see the comments people have put in, and then a final ruling around this would probably come out a little bit later. And then just keep in mind, with anything that starts as an initiative, they are likely to become requirements really, really soon. We've seen this in other places, seen it in CMMC, in the defense space. And do consider that a lot of what you're doing or your compliance and regulation requirements already require this. So you can see this in controls for encryption of data at rest, in transit, and while in use. So in the future, I wouldn't expect necessarily that there would be a huge shift in these controls, maybe some language changes and maybe some additional controls. But do keep in mind, these already exist and you're going to be held to them at some point. So not thinking about this yet is a humongous risk for any organization. Also consider harvest now and decrypt later, also known as store now, decrypt later attacks. And hackers use this. Basically, you hear about it all the time. They're taking the data and they're doing nothing with it. So organizations who get breached, a lot of the time they'll say, you know what? Hackers got in, they got the data, but it's encrypted. They can't do anything with it yet. And to a certain degree, they're right. Yet. Now, in the future, though, what they're really waiting for is that when a quantum computer comes along, again, running Shor's algorithm, would be able to break that encryption very, very quickly. And all of that information out there now is sensitive, it's going to be available to these hackers. So, and I did list on the right side the types of sensitive data that you may have at your organization, and what it could be potentially used for. So things like PII, PHI, you have credit card information, proprietary information, and of course government, secret, top secret. You may have any of that. And do consider that even something like any of this data can be used to create a profile of you. Someone can impersonate you, can steal your identity. We all know that. But even proprietary information like business secrets can be crippling to our financial businesses and our financial markets, because if you are a large enough organization and you have proprietary and business secrets that give you a competitive advantage, if hackers can get that and decrypt all that information, now you have a problem, don't you? And that could affect our financial markets and could be devastating to us as a country as a whole. correct? And of course, with the secret, top secret, and government data, that's always a risk. You know, defense secrets are huge. So I know we're running close to top of time, just a few more minutes. Stick with me. We're almost done. But I did want to walk you through, walk through these questions with, on your own. On the bottom left, it says, do you need to worry? And you need to answer the following questions. And they align with the bars at the bottom that you're seeing, the A, B, and C in the different colors. So you need to identify how long it will take for you to migrate to a quantum ready state, meaning get all, figure out what type of encryption you have currently, create an inventory of that, and figure out which post-quantum solution you want to go to and actually get there, right? How long will it take you? That's just part A. Part B is, what is the security shelf life of your data? Again, this depends on your regulatory requirements. It could be something like 7 years. It could be 50 years, like education organizations, universities and those folks. It could be quite a bit. And then also moving all of that data that you have over to a post-quantum encryption solution. And then C is very important. It says, when will we see a quantum advantage? Again, you see a lot of question marks there on purpose, because imagine if we did see a quantum computer that showed an advantage, and your organization has yet to even get to their quantum ready state and migrate. Any hacker that can get into your environment would be able to decrypt any information you have that you consider secure at this time. And it would no longer be secure, as well as, again, we talked about the harvest now, decrypt later. I do want to get to the end here about what can we do. So let me go back there. So educate yourself and others. So you started the journey. You attended this presentation. It's a great start, but make sure you go out and do your own research and encourage others to do it too and learn more about quantum computing. Second, at your organization, regardless of what level you're at, get senior leadership involved and invested. And a way to do this is that all this educating you're doing, share it internally, do lunch and learns, do something like that, speak up in meetings and say, hey, what are we doing to get ready? So propose a quantum readiness initiative, okay? And you can do that when you have a little background and you can speak to what is important. And then create a post-quantum team. Again, you may or may not be at a level to create the team yourself, but encourage the creation of this team. But make sure you have the people with the right skills and background, because if you don't, you won't get the right solution. So again, this goes back to education and learning more, and getting more people in the talent pipeline. But make sure you have people who understand cryptography, who understand quantum computing, who understand business, because you need to understand your business to be able to pick the right solution, as discussed earlier. Not too little, not too much, just right. And then we discussed the second to last bullet point, start preparing now, as projects will take time to complete. That guidance we talked about from CISA, NSA, and NIST that I walked through at a high level previously, you can actually get that roadmap at the link on the screen, and it'll give you a really good starting point and a little more detailed information than I was able to walk through in the short amount of time we had today. And you'd be able to kind of start your journey there. So take that as a little bit of homework. And then at the end, identify, finalize, and implement solutions that align with your business strategy, regulatory requirements, and cybersecurity and privacy requirements. So again, start now, and as soon as you figure everything out, just get it going, because it's coming. And if you don't start now, it might be too late. So I know I ran a little bit over, but if there's any questions or anything, and I'll open up my screen to see if there are. There we go. And then, yeah, so I don't see any questions, but feel free to reach out to me right here. This is my LinkedIn. Please feel free to connect with me there and send me any questions, and I'm happy to talk to anybody that would like to discuss this further. But thanks for joining today.